Hello and welcome back to the Freedom Podcast with me, your host, Josh Nozel. And we've got Pastor G with us today.
Come on, Josh. Ready to go.
Hey, come on, let's go. We had a good old catch up last week about your trip to the USA. And this week we've got something a bit different where we're going to be looking at how to pursue the 72. So we're going to be looking at, there are many people who have felt called. And I think even if you don't feel called necessarily to be a part of being sent, there's something about, because it's the 72, it's for those that stay and those that go. That 72 is not just 72 new churches, it's including the ones that we've already planted and established. And so saying, how are we going to pursue this vision in our life? Because you might be called, you might have a conviction that you're going to go, but maybe it's next year, maybe it's in the years to come. But what can you do right now? And I think that one of the ideas and analogies that comes to my mind is I remember doing some driving instruction with a guy, and he was talking to me about how you've got to be accelerating or braking. Don't coast. Either you're being intentional about stopping or intentional about going
Yeah,
forward,
that's good,
but
Josh.
that
Yeah.
creates traction. And if you don't have that, you don't have as much traction. So when you coast down a road and you're not accelerating or braking, because say you're going down a hill, you lose the traction, you lose the grip of the road. But when you're accelerating, when you're braking, when you're being intentional, that's the best traction that you can get. And so we want the people of our church, we want you guys who are listening to this today to be able to gain traction, to know what you're going into and what you can do next. We don't want people that are static or just feel like, I've had this amazing dream and vision and God's downloading to me, but now I don't know what to do next. So we're going to be talking about that today, G.
Yeah, and perhaps I just add to that. You're talking really about transition. When you transition
Yeah.
from, perhaps one gear to another, the worst thing you can do is stay neutral. You want to engage pretty quick. The vulnerability is always between the shift. And I think as God has called people, evidently the 72 vision that came out, the cave, we had over 200 plus like responses of people saying, I want to go 72. I'm ready to go. And so immediately, I'm sure we're speaking to some people now who have felt that shift. And it might be the start, because it could be for 2024. But it is amazing how navigating it is really important, because there's been a shift in your heart where God has like put a call for the future, but you can't jump into that next week. It could be a year ahead. It could be 2 years ahead. And I think stewarding that call involves transition and healthy transition. And that's what you're talking about, Josh, is you've got to be careful, like you don't end up in a little bit of a neutral, because I'm waiting for the new thing, but I'm still in the current thing. And I wanted to say this to our, listeners today is if God has spoken to you, it's so important that you remain present where you
Very
are.
good. Mm-hmm.
I've seen too many people disengage, almost like they a bit of an out of body experience, that they've sort of, hey, I've got that call and now my heart is in this place, or it's, I don't know where he's going to send me, but you almost disengage a bit from the present. And yet for 72, it's going to take time to roll out. And as it rolls out, I want to encourage you, don't disengage too early. It's what many people do. Stay present. God can still prepare you as you pursue the call. God can still, work within you, and you need to be present though. Don't disengage from the current situation. And then for people like, I had several people come and say, okay, I don't feel the call for 72, but I feel the call to stay, within my church and build for this next season. And I'm like, hey, that is fantastic. We need people to stay. We don't want everyone to go.
Definitely.
And in that sense, again, it's like, put your heads down, pursue, grow yourself, because we want to grow our existing churches, not just plant new. And in fact, we're going to need to grow. I mean, this is really important, Josh. We need to grow our existing churches to be able
Yeah.
to plant those out of 72, because for some of our places we're not ready yet to plant 72, but God's put maybe a city in our heart. So it's like what we do now, those two things: be present if you feel God is calling you, be present.
Mm,
If you feel God's called you to stay, grow the church, get ready, prepare that launch pad for those that will go, that we're all in this and have a part to play.
definitely. And G, obviously, we've seen a lot of people over the last 10 years get sown out and go through this process where they feel called, where they get raised up and they get sent. And it's been amazing to see so many people go through that. And we've seen some people do it really well. And we've seen some people where they get lost in that transition. And there's a picture where that comes to mind in the First World War where you've got two battle lines and trenches. In the in between, there's the no man's land
Yeah.
where people would not occupy, where you couldn't survive. It was the war zone. And it's almost like when people start to go towards vision, they get out of their trench with their troops and they run onto no man's land, but they haven't yet entered the new battle line. They're kind of in the in between. And I think that it's fair to say, isn't it, G, that we've seen a lot of people do that over the years where they start to almost, oh, it's the time to get up over the trenches. Let's storm to the next hill. And actually, you need to prepare and get ready to storm so that you can keep going through no man's land to get to where you're going. Because if you don't have that next battle line to go to, you're going to get lost, displaced, and it can be a negative thing for you in that waiting season rather than being a positive.
Yeah, and that's part of this idea of pursuing. You got to pursue the call. It means you've got to keep going, keep moving. Don't settle. Even if there is a time, we often struggle with living in the present when God speaks, maybe prophetically. He speaks about, hey, I'm calling you into this next thing. We all want to jump straight into it, but you've almost got to cross through no man's land to get to the call. And I think that's where you come under fire. Very real thing. That's where you're most vulnerable, is in the transition from one to the other. It's not the change that kills you, it's transition that will kill you if you get stuck in the no man's land, because you'll come under fire. You might think, do I need to turn back? Do I need, am I making the right decision? And no, I think there will be days where there will be those doubts of, have I heard from God? Is this going to work out? How am I going to do it? Well, God did speak. So I'd encourage everyone who heard God speak and you responded at the cave, you need to pursue the call that God put in you. It's not just, don't just take it for granted that I got the call and it's arrived. It's almost like a daily, weekly,
Mm,
monthly thing that you're going to need to work out and pursue towards that end place, of the next thing that's
yeah.
coming, and take it seriously, because the enemy doesn't want it. He wants to rob that from you. And I just know, I saw the people that responded and saw within, couples, singles, families, just saw the potential, the great potential of God in them. But the enemy, he's not sitting back thinking, oh, let's let all of these, these believers pursue Jesus. He's going to be thinking, I'm going to put the shells over, I'm going to put the fire on them to see if they might turn back. So what we do
Yeah.
next in pursuing that call, pursuing the growth of our church in where we are for what God has next, so whatever our part we play within 72, whether it's to stay and strengthen so others can go, or to be the ones that will go, we have a part to play to pursue the vision.
Yeah, G, and I don't know if you've got any kind of examples that come to mind for you personally about this, but the one that comes to mind for me is that when we felt really called in 2017 to go to the States, and within a few weeks we were like ready to go. Well, I certainly was anyway. Thinking about going and how that plan's going to be and that transition's going to be. I was leading academy at the time. We were pastors in Hereford, and there was a lot where we had to weigh up what's right in front of us and continue to build there and not just get caught up in the next thing. And I think even if we had almost the more that we put into where we're going, so you can miss what's right in front of you and what wants to do in the there and then. And I think that because of our immediacy as humans, we often see things that God's calling us to in the future, and we feel like that's tomorrow, that's next week, that's next month, and so our hearts and our minds start to get drawn into it. But that can often be an unhealthy thing for us to live in. It's good to be aware of what the seed that's been planted for the future, and to be prayerful and mindful of that. But if we keep almost living and thinking about that, we can miss what's right in front of us. And we went and had another academy year in after, because this was May 2017. Then we had some amazing academy students. And it's like, I'm going to build what's right here in front of us. And we had an incredible time shaping leaders that would eventually come with us to the US that we had no
Yeah.
idea at that time that they would. But that was part of the call. But if we got sucked into, oh, we've got to go, and that's what I'm thinking about and fixated on, we would have missed the opportunity to shape and to mold the people that were actually going to come and be a part of that team that we didn't know. And then even after that, we had the year where it fell through in 2018, and we had to have another year's delay. That's when I had the opportunity to work with you to write the book. That wouldn't
Yeah.
have happened if we'd just been fixated on, well, I'm just thinking about going, and we just got to think about what's next. We had the time to kind of chronicle the story of Freedom Church in the Firestarters book, but it was all because we're not going to get caught out in no man's land. We're going to keep one eye on the future and what God's calling us to, but we've still got to be here present and building where we are.
Yeah, it's a great example, Josh, because the God's timing is never wasted. You might think you're waiting, but in God's eyes, He doesn't waste minutes. He doesn't waste hours by thinking, we'll just put you on hold. It feels like that to us because we don't know what's going on. But, we have this saying that even when nothing's happening, something's happening. And I think that's like God's way is, he's busy working even in the waiting. Apart from patience and faith that you need to come through that, there are things for you to prepare, get ready. As you said, the book, Firestarters, the book, that might not be a thing right now. It might not be out. And yet there are people being impacted around the world in that book that was written because God carved out time that wasn't in our timing, but it was like, no, I'm going to do this to set you up, to create space. And if you were, well, I can't think about anything else because my mind is already in the US because that's where we're going, it wouldn't have happened. So again, great encouragement for everyone listening is there is definitely going to be time lapses between you going from the call into the actual place of arrival. Use this time. See that God, don't see it as like, oh, I'm impatient. I'm waiting for something to happen. I'm on hold. No, God's not wasting that time. Look at what you can do in between and what He's asking you to do, because it could be the very critical thing that you will need that happens within you or that happens for the people around you for what's coming next. I think it's just such a great way. Be aware of it. Let God grow you. Let God use you. Be available, and don't coast. Engage. Get that gear engaged. Keep going because
Amen.
God won't waste time
Yeah.
with any of us.
For sure. And so we're going to talk about now some ways that you can do that in this season where you can practically apply some of what we're talking about. So one of the first ways that we can pursue, and I'm going through a resource that I found recently from when we did 10-4, and we gave out these cards, and I thought, wow, this is such great stuff that I wanted to bring it to the podcast and just help bring it to 2023. And help people also with some of these things that they can do in the in between. And so things that they can focus, everyone that you can focus your energy and focus and pursue on. So the first one of course is Jesus. Your relationship with Jesus must be growing, developing, and evident. How am I investing in my relationship with Jesus? So we've got this amazing question to start off with. What's your thoughts on that, G?
Yeah, this is the foundational one, isn't it? You know, we're going to pursue, we're going to go after the call, everything else. What you've got to keep grounded in is your relationship with Jesus and an investment of growing that. And you know, I think God pretty soon on said to me, "Hey, your current relationship with me won't be enough to take you where you need to go. It's got to grow. You know, if you're
Mm,
satisfied thinking, oh yeah, I've got, you know, I have my devotions, I have my time with Jesus, and it's great, you know, and that for where He's going to take you will require greater faith, and from that greater faith, what's that rooted in? It's in the relationship with who Jesus is, and that's where He wants to go deeper and deeper. That's where you got to gravitate back to. And when I started, you know, planting church all those years ago, and I was 22, you know, I actually had this lesson that God was teaching me. Was He said to me, look, unless you're going to see this thing work, it won't work unless you get deeper and deeper with depending on me. And the coming years, I saw perhaps a lot of disappointment with people that would come and leave. They would promise, they would, you know, I just had a great expectation. We were going to change our town. We were full of faith. And I put my faith sometimes in people, in thinking they're going to be the answer for this. They're going to come and help us on worship. And they're going
mm,
to, you know, and
yeah.
you're, as a young pastor, you're just looking for, there's like 8 of us. So you're looking for like that growth, that answer, and it's followed through by disappointment, discouragement. You know, that's the reality of it, the years that came. And I remember being so disappointed. And then, you know, there was this perhaps realization where I just had, do you know what? God said, you haven't got any right to be disappointed. You know, people walked away from Jesus. They deserted him, and he was the great, you know, he was the Son of God. He was the greatest teacher of all time. Here he is, and people deserted him. And he says, and you think people won't
Mm,
leave you? And he said, your only assurance and foundation must be in Jesus, because he is the only one that will never fail you. And we quote it, Jesus never fails.
mm,
But it's out of the relationship of knowing that whatever storm comes, whatever discouragement, when I pursue the call, you are going to come up against disappointment, things that won't work out. There's going to be some hardship. Do you know what anchors you? Jesus.
mm.
And so you're going to need to be so close to Jesus, not a case of just connecting in when you need to, but a ongoing, daily, hourly conversation, connection with who he is. And that's what I decided. I decided I was going to put Jesus as my anchor. He's going to be the one that's going to steady me through whatever storm that comes. I won't then put this expectation on others and then, you know, almost be rocked by it, because I'm going to make sure this connection with Jesus is foremost. So whenever we went through stuff, I just came back to Jesus and said, gee, that was tough, but you're with me. You'll never fail me. And I think
Absolutely.
that closeness is something I want to encourage everyone to get to. It doesn't just happen. You got to like go deeper, get the nets out on the other side, go deeper. You got to go deeper. That's what he's asking of us.
You've got to invest in your relationship.
Yeah.
You've got to put the time in, haven't you, to grow in that relationship. And that's what we're
Yeah.
wanting people to do. Is that you feel called for mission, invest in your relationship with Jesus. It's so simple but
Investment.
so
Great word.
essential. And we're
Yeah.
doing this series at the moment. We're doing the Good Shepherd. It's all about Psalm 23, and we had prayer last night at church. We were just praying into this psalm, and one of the things that I just really felt that God was wanting to do through this series is refresh the expression of relationship of our people, give them a freshness. Whether it's I always interact with God in this way, and God just
Yeah.
wants to bring a new thing. He wants to bring a new freshness to the relationships of people across our church with Him, that they would know His voice better, that they would start to hear Him in new ways and feel
Good.
closer to Him. And so that's one of the things I believe that God is going to do through this series right now. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about this beautiful image about how God leads us beside still waters, and it's all about His presence. And I was thinking about the Garden of Eden, and just this is where we see mankind begin, and like this is the destination for us too. Is that that's what God's wanting to always draw us back to. So when we come and we draw close it to Him, and spend that invest in that relational time with Him, that's one of the best things we can do to prepare to be on mission. Is know that the source of everything that we do is coming from Jesus.
Yeah, one of the things, Josh, I covered as well in The Good Shepherd was really all around his voice, hearing his voice,
Right.
hearing the shepherd's voice, because it's not so much about, yeah, I know his word, but it's actually about knowing his voice.
Mm.
And I just speak into that, but just reflecting on this point again is you've got to know the voice of Jesus, because there's so many voices that will compete for your attention, especially as you pursue. It's like, oh no, you can settle, no, you can turn back, you can take a detour, and the voices will compete for your attention. You need to hear above all of that the voice of the shepherd. So again, how do you make sure you're not distracted, that other voices don't have the priority over the voice of Jesus? And it's the investment, but it's also the space that you create. It's also like just saying, I've got to create space for Jesus to speak. And I've got to recognize the voice of my shepherd, because he will direct you, he will
Really good.
lead you. So when we talk about he's going to lead you to green pastures, he's going to lead you. You need to hear his voice. He doesn't lead you forcefully, he leads you by calling you, and you follow. And that's what you're going to need to know.
It's great stuff. So the second one here is in this pursuit column is around pursuing leaders. And the text that goes with it says, the armor bearer was at the shoulder of Jonathan, submitting himself, trusting and supporting his leader. And then the question that goes with this one is, how am I serving or supporting the leaders in my life?
Yeah, I think before we can become a great leader, we've got to become a great follower. It's the way it works. So many people read, perhaps the books that are out there on 5 steps of becoming a great leader, becoming more influential, all these different strength-based leadership, all great principles. You don't see so many about 5 steps of being a great follower. And yet that's where it starts. Because when
That's
you
right.
can be a great follower, you can become a great leader. And those principles, some of you might be thinking, yeah, I've been a follower for a long time, but it's important. It's important that you remember what it is to follow. Because for you to get behind and serve, and before, many years ago, we went to Africa. I went to Africa for the very first time. It wasn't to plant church. It was actually
Mm-hmm.
go and speak at some conference over there. And then whilst I was there, we were called to support a local pastor and his local vision in doing child sponsorship. We built orphanages, schools, and our church engaged in all of that. Not for anything for ourselves, as in we're going to go and plant church. And for those years we did it, God said to me, I want you to serve another man's vision, because it's all part of, will you submit and give of yourselves, time, money, resource? And as a church, we served in to that situation under someone else's vision. And I felt like God was, again, just training me to say, you want people to follow what I'm going to do in the future. And after that came 10-4 in the future. It was learn to follow others. And for many of us, we have perhaps a vision or a call in our own life. And that is the main thing that we almost are just looking to fulfill. But I've learned that God will train us first, even with the armor bearer, Jonathan. It was Jonathan's vision. Well, the armor bearer, it was Jonathan saying, got this great vision. We've got one weapon between the two of us. You haven't got one. It's a do or die. The odds don't look great. Are you ready to come
It's
with
not the
me?
most compelling plan, is it? It's like,
It,
oh, do you want to cut? We might make it. We might not. I've got a weapon. You haven't. We're going to climb a cliff first before we fight them. It's
it does sound like 72.
It does. For sure.
It's like, come on,
For
guys.
sure.
And yet the crazy thing is we've got armor bearers
We do.
just like
An
that in
amazing
our
bunch.
church who are saying, I don't know what this looks like, but I'm coming. And I think that principle again, God is training. You might be following right now in a place of being a follower, but I think being great followers is only a prerequisite to the being a great leader. Because when you can be a great, if you turn around, Josh, I'm sure you've got people in your church that you would just, if I said, hey, name your 3 top followers. Do you know what I mean? It's like, who would they be and what would those
So
characteristics be?
his name is no, I won't do it.
Name them. But there are great followers that are getting alongside you. They're not always waiting for you to say, hey, can you do this? There's something back there on your shoulder. They're
For
like, oh, does that
sure.
need doing? Hey,
100%.
I thought this needed sorting. Hey, I'm here to encourage you. I'm sending that message in. I noticed Sunday was tough, but you know what? We're behind you as a couple and we're cheering you on. And what can we do to serve? Can we help with the kids? Can we do like there's that follower that's saying, I'm going to serve another person's vision. And we got to learn that principle because that's one of servanthood. And servanthood is the greatest thing. And as we do that, God then entrusts us with far more. God entrusts us with like, do you know what? Now others will get behind you. But the armor bearer just said, yeah, I haven't really got a lot to offer, but I've got this heart to pursue. And it said they pursued them up the mountain. And it's just incredible how getting alongside other leaders, because God has placed leaders around you to train and prepare you, but
Mm.
your proximity to them will determine how much that influences you. If you're only really fulfilling the minimum, I think you get minimum return. But if you can get around them and rub shoulders and even ask
Yeah.
questions, and I'm a believer in great question asking. If you're around a leader that you really have, you have respect for, and you just think, I want to emulate that, then ask questions. Ask questions, like get around them, almost like just get alongside them and let it rub off on you. I think there's some great principles there about pursuing and becoming the leader that you will be. Get around the leaders that God's placed in your
Yeah,
life.
definitely. And I think that you've got to get around the leader that you're in proximity with. So this is not just about leaders that are pastors. These are not just leaders
Yes,
that
good
are
Josh.
maybe
Yeah,
the senior leaders. This is about a leader. It might be your kids team leader. It might be your host team leader. It might be your streams leader, your group leader. It might be the pastor, but there's often only certain people that have got that kind of proximity. But
yeah,
what you can do is serve the leader that you are connected to, and that we all have that. You can imagine if you've got 15, 20 people saying to a pastor, what can I do? How can I help? It actually becomes more overwhelming than helpful. But if you are doing that to the person that you're with, there's chances are you might be the only person that said that this week, this
yeah,
month, the last 3 months. There's something around being intentional around the leader. Pursue the leader that is in your life that you're connected to. And that's how you get to serve the much greater vision. And I can't agree with you more, G. Being prepared to be leading and influencing others in the future, the best way is to follow well. That's the best way.
yeah. And God will always elevate you. I think some people, they get concerned that, well, if I just serve another, I've got this vision, this big vision God's put in me, and if I continue to almost serve in my local church or serve within that setting, I might miss it. I don't believe you will, because God, if there's calling in you for greater purpose, it
Mm,
will always come through. But that is actually the way that we're shown, is through our that pipeline of serving our leaders, serving those around us, getting alongside them, emulating them. There's something that happens. In addition, Josh, I think sometimes we don't always get on with the leaders that are over us. You might be, I don't know, in perhaps a small group setting, or in some, led by someone that just perhaps in a like personality way that you don't really get
Yeah,
on
it
with,
happens.
but they are over you and they're leading you. Maybe
Mm,
they even lead in a way that wouldn't be the way you would do it. Maybe they make some decisions that you wouldn't necessarily do. So there's friction. I want to encourage you again. God often puts people around you. And sometimes, we even see with King Saul, who was insecure, he was an insecure leader. And yet David was put under him for a period of time to learn. And you can learn from someone, even if you see some faults. I think it's very important because David always honored him and he wouldn't touch him. There was something
mm,
about, no, I've got to take care of my development, my calling, and not get caught up in almost being against the king. And in the same way with leaders, if there's a struggle there, you got to just think, okay, perhaps I have a person put in my life who I'm serving on team. I do struggle. Look at what God wants to do within you, within your heart, learning to submit into that. And if it is more of a personality thing, if it's just a certain way, whereas you could do two ways, but you don't like their way, do you know what? Learn to submit. I think there's something powerful about learning to submit. We can all do it when we like someone that's leading us. But when there's someone that we struggle with, it's a real test of our
yeah,
hearts to say, actually, our leadership have put this person in place, so I will honor that. And even though it's a struggle, work in me, Lord, work in me, cause me be more patient. Help me to find a way through this rather than waiting for them to change. Why not see the change within you and pursue that change? Because one day you may lead others and you will want the same grace and you want the same way that people look to you who they might not see eye to eye to you. And that's a great test. So always be aware of that it's a great opportunity to grow.
absolutely. Someone was literally talking to me about this yesterday, and we were talking around how do you submit to someone when you don't agree with them? And I was like, that's the exact time when you do submit, because otherwise it's just we're constantly in agreement. You don't really have to get behind or follow someone if you just always agree with them. It's like, well, I would have done the same thing anyway. But actually, you only get to practice humility and build your character when you do think something different. So I try to reframe it and see it as an opportunity that you can swallow your own pride and your own opinion, and do things that the leader is suggesting and get behind them and own that decision. And even better, when actually it turns out that your idea was the better idea, or it didn't go as well as was thought. It's like, that's another great character test. Are you gonna own that, or are you going to like, as in, are you going to still own the leader's decision, or are you going to think, oh well, it turns out I was right?
Yeah. Come on.
So the next one here is pursue opportunities. Pursue leadership opportunities through serving. And the question that goes with it is, what opportunities are there for me to grow in? So one of the ways that we're really suggesting here, and what we were kind of talking about, is there's always ways and areas to build the church. The more experience that you build up of having served, of being involved in things, the greater blessing you're going to be to build the kingdom either where you are or somewhere else, because you'll get gaining hold of those opportunities that are around you.
Yeah, we've got a couple in Hereford right now who are getting ready to go to Limassol, Cyprus, to pastor there.
Come on,
Lil
team.
and Lewis, shout out to them. And I've just been very impressed with them because they have a few months before they go, and they've both been actively serving in our church and taking every opportunity. But lately, I've seen them almost in every meeting and aspect. They're both on worship at the minute, which they weren't on before, because they want to just jump in because they're going to be leading some of that stuff when they go into the campus that they're going to be leading. And then I'm going into other meetings like a review meeting, and Lily sat there because she's asked to come in and she wants the opportunity. She
Yeah.
wants to listen. learn. She wants to be involved in this aspect and that aspect. And to see that attitude, it really is great. But you don't have to be, I don't know, asked to pastor a church to step into those opportunities. It
Mm,
starts young. You know, I love seeing some of our Zeal guys who are currently working on our, sound desks at the minute, and they're working on, they're just involved in the mix. It's like taking hold of the opportunities, you grow. But for many of us, we can sort of draw back from that sometimes and then just think, oh, well, I'll do this bit, because you want to grow yourself, seize opportunities, apprentice where you can, just even serving in Zeal and just like learning and working alongside our students is such an amazing opportunity to grow yourself. Maybe some of those things are even things that scare you, where you think, oh, I'm not sure if I'm any good with kids. And yet we have such an abundance of kids in a lot of our locations. It might be the very thing to say, look, get the opportunity, go and serve for a period of time. I think it's looking for opportunity and stepping up into it so that you can learn and grow, like pursue opportunity, because often that opportunity is actually the door to the next opportunity that God wants to move within. And we're waiting for something almost like this bigger opportunity. But we teach this, it always starts with a test of small things. When David left that day his field, his father said, take your packed lunch to your brothers on the field. He started with a small opportunity, and yet later on ends up on the field facing Goliath. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't, many of us want to go and like, yeah, I'm going to go and fight the giant. But are you ready to carry the lunchbox? Are you ready to go and serve those people around you? And it's the opportunity. And I think God was apprenticing him all that time, getting him ready, getting him ready. So yeah, grab those chances as they're gold. Just that experience. You learn about people, you learn about how you can lead. And don't just keep it again. I can do this one thing, or I'm a bit stretched. Maybe there's more that God wants to grow you in, and seize hold of it so you can grow.
fantastic. Love it. And I think that with those opportunities, they build us, don't they? They prepare us for what's ahead. But one of the things I would just advise as well is ask. Often there are opportunities that we can see, perhaps, that we think, I could do something about that. Hey, would you mind if I just took that on? Can I take care of that? Would you be up for that? And sometimes the leader might say no, and it's the wrong thing. But often there's not other. I can tell you, as a leader who's been leading in our church for a number of years now, there's not a lot of people that ask those questions. And sometimes if you just
Yeah.
come forward and ask and knock on the door and see what happens, look for those opportunities too. Don't just wait. I think so many people wait for opportunities to come to them and don't go and seek them out.
Yeah, good.
So the last one here then, G, is lifestyle. And it says start living like a planter right now. Your personal discipline, your financial management, who you're reaching, all reflect your desire to develop in God. And then the question that goes with it says, how can I adapt my lifestyle to become who God is calling me to be?
Yeah, this is a great question, isn't it? Because you, even in the transition and the waiting, God wants to grow you, not just in that relationship with Jesus, but also just in the decisions of self-discipline in your lifestyle. He wants to grow those fruits of the Spirit. He wants to grow your character. And those come through us, being intentional about how we deal with things. Where do we struggle? What are the things that we do need to grow? Hey, I need to grow my patience. I'm going to grow in that. I'm going to grow the way I handle my finances. Because if I'm going to go and step into this next thing, am I ready to do that? Whereas if I just haven't managed that well and I don't have any resource available, how am I going to sustain myself? Do you know what I mean? It's really important questions, because sometimes we have people with such a big heart and we absolutely love it, big heart. And it's like, I'm willing, I'm ready to go. And we respond. But because we haven't been good at handling our finance and we haven't stewarded that well, we're not prepared. And then it's like, oh, actually, I get into the situation I'm planted out into this thing, but I can only sustain myself for 3 months, and then you're struggling because you're not able to cover things. And again, it's just really important that we look at our lifestyle, whether that's around, finance, around our character, around things that God is moving within us, setting ourselves up, um, even within just being healthy and active. I just think all those things. It's like God's calling you. You need to be disciplined in the way you get up, the bed times you have. Again, just the sleep you have. It's
Yeah.
really important because I know some people
Yeah.
that
It's good.
it's all over the place, and there often is a lethargy about them. And yet, I'm going to respond to God's call. It comes down to lifestyle. It needs to match the call. We need to be ready and fit to be able, as an athlete, we're spiritual athletes, and God calls us into that. And it says, don't just run this race, any old way. Run it to win. Be specific, be intentional. And I think that's part of our lifestyle. What are the areas in your life, perhaps currently, that are a weakness? It's a
Yeah.
struggle for you.
Uh-huh.
I know someone, again, with a real sort of diet issue, just struggling around the things they eat, and just undisciplined, and they've decided and been confronted to start leading themselves in it, and they've started a whole new lifestyle, and they have shed so much weight from it, but with it, it's brought a greater alertness spiritually. It's
Yeah.
brought, it's this thing of I'm overcoming this.
Mm.
It's so connected that our lifestyle, that we can come and conquer that and deal with it. It is important that we lead ourselves. And I often talk about self-leadership. That's what this is you might want to sometimes think about leading others, going to plant a church and reaching others. But if you can't lead yourself in your spiritual life, but also your lifestyle choices, then hey, how can God trust you to lead others?
Yeah, it's so true. And you got some people who get caught up in the vision and they want to go and do great things. But then if your own life's a tatters financially and you've got debt that you need to deal with, and I've had this conversation sometimes with people, it's like, right, first of all, your first part of your church planting mission, go and deal with your debt. And then
Yeah.
we can start looking at how you're going to get ready to go. But that's the first thing. Go and get a second job. Go and work extra hours. Go and get rid and sort this out and manage your money better. And that will help you go be a church planter, but not thinking that somehow these two things are displaced. And I can't tell you how many people almost separate their lifestyle and their choices into what God's calling them to do with vision. It's like they're connected so deeply, and that's why we want to give you those thoughts really on what you can do now to take steps to prepare you, whether it's later this year or in the years to come, so that you are ready as you can be when you go.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Fantastic. Love it, Josh.
Good stuff. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I hope it's been helpful to you today, and we'll be back with another episode soon. Thanks, everyone.